to the Daoscape Arts podcast. This is part 2 of a 3-part podcast titled Amerta and Beyond, Free Dance Movement Meditation, recorded while sitting in Linglong Park, Beijing, China, with professional performance artist and free movement facilitator Bo SiWen. SiWen has a background in Chinese performing arts and has been delivering workshops that revolve around the Javanese Amerta free movement approach to meditative expression. This episode covers working alongside one's ego, the Buddhist flavour of Amerta dance, and SiWen's first experiences of Indonesia and Amerta practice. Would you say there's 2 phases then? There's a kind of like a practice phase where you're exploring and working with the movement and your feelings, and there's also a performance aspect, a kind of performance dimension?
We can use this kind of practice to give us ideas of performance, but I think for performance it's a bit more complicated than just improvisation. The work itself is improvisational, but in performance, it requires some sort of like organization. For example, you need to know where your audience are. You need to be very conscious about what kind of message you want to deliver. But in the practice, you don't have that kind of pressure. You can just be free. You can just discover. Yeah.
So the stuff you learned from Prapto is actually quite flexible, and you can use it, you can push it towards performance, or you can kind of retreat into this kind of practice dimension.
Yes, exactly. And I think people who come to the practice, they all have different goals. Some people want to discover their potential, some people want to be healed, some people want to have this revelation beyond the 3-dimensional world.
Oh, wow.
They can be connected with the spirit world. And some people even think this practice is kind of like a shamanic practice. Yeah, people all have different goals, and they all have different insights. And some people, they're artists. They come to the workshop to generate the new body language, and then they can use the body language in their further creation of their artworks. So there's so many different ways to explore. And I remember one time in my workshop in Beijing, I took the participants to a farmland in a park, and then because we live in the city and our body are so unfamiliar with the farms and the soil, so as soon as people go into the farms and the body didn't really know what to do, they didn't really want to dance anymore, and they just want to get close to the soil, they want to smell it, they want to grasp it and sense it, and some people even put the mud on their body. And one woman, she just had a beautiful like touching moment, and I don't know what exactly happened, but she felt she was finally home in that space, and the environment just brought her to tears, and she even fall into the pit of the mud and allowing all her body to be in the mud, and she felt like, oh, this is so comfortable. I'm finally in this natural state. I'm not in this grey, ugly blocks of buildings anymore. I'm home. Yeah, so you never imagine what happens in the movement practice, but the body knows where to go and knows what it wants. It has its own wisdom.
Is there a way to know if, you say body knows, but of course we've got this kind of like, maybe this kind of wholesome spiritual dimension to our body, but we also have this ego side as well. And how do you know if the ego's telling you to jump in the mud, or if the,
that's very possible.
If the spirit is, so how do people work with that within that practice?
Of course we have ego, and as what I said before, there are different factors that influence how we move. One is the body, one is maybe the mind, or you can call it the ego, and the heart, intention, and environment, and unseen. Yeah, so these kind of things. And how do you deal with the ego in movement practice? I think you have to acknowledge it first, because we are humans. It's natural for us to have egos. We cannot just pretend to be saint and pretend to be loving, we can love unconditionally and move without this small self. That's impossible. So, but we can use the ego, we can use the emotions, or we can use the stories as a source of creation. Yeah. So how we can not be dragged by it, but we are aware we are walking alongside of the ego, and we can collaborate with it and to make art from it. For example, some people can be very emotional in the movement practice because the body memories start to come out and the mind start to make stories. They start to label it. For example, I'm so miserable when I was as a child, and when I'm in dance moving with this man, I think he's my father, and he remind me of the time where I was being ignored. This is all the mind making stories. But if you are aware of this state, if you are not being pulled by the emotions or the stories, you can still like, oh, I know you're there. I know I have this story going on, but I am also aware that I can make new steps. I can make new change. I can transform this ego or transform the story into something new, something more present, something more like a song, like a poem, not so unpleasant anymore.
Do you think it's easy to do that through the dance? I mean, maybe some people have a natural talent for that as well. But I mean, for the average person who comes to the practice, do you think it's easy for them to do that, or do you think this is very subtle and there's a very deep dimension? Or
for some people, it can be easy, it can be quick. For some people, definitely it requires some practice, because I think our minds learn by repetition. And if this is something we are not familiar with, definitely it will take time for you to have the new thinking pattern, to have the new habit, and to have the, so when you spot your ego, you can immediately detect it, and you can you can tell yourself, okay, I know I'm familiar with this, but now I choose not to go with it. But it requires training, of course. Yeah, it takes time. Yeah. I think you're quite interested in the ego.
Yeah, because when I watched the video, I think I saw a video on your social media of some people doing this practice, and I'm just kind of, I mean, I'm very open to how people want to express themselves, and and I'm aware that this isn't a normal dance practice. But people looking from outside, if they see it, they're thinking this is being presented to me to impress me or to inspire me or make me feel a certain way.
Not necessarily.
So I'm guessing a lot of people would. So my question is, when I've seen some of those people, I've looked at it through those kind of glasses, and part of me feels this person wants to be seen as a kind of mysterious dancing hippie person, if you see what I mean. I think that's what the average person on the street might think.
I think if the intention of the practice is to show something, to the outside, I think this person who is practicing the movement is missing the point. The point is not about showing, it's about being. So Prapto often teach us some things like the difference between doing and being. So doing, like you're showing something especially to the audience, and that's one thing. But without doing, without speaking, you are already being yourself. So the being is the being of movement. So when you move, your body is in a state of being, not really in a state of doing. Because naturally we also move. We don't have stillness like in all of the times. Yeah, we move. It's just this is a different way of movement. Even it's not very ordinary, and people might judge it. But still, once you acknowledge that this is just a being of movement, and then you will let go of that kind of prejudice or fear or rejection. Yeah.
So in Prapto's original idea of this kind of movement, it's less about kind of performance to like a specific audience, and it's more about yourself. Is that right?
It's more about making dialogues. Yeah, it's more about tuning, and it's also about being aware of the energy around us and create new energies. Yeah, it's more about that. So this is like, I don't know when people practice Tai Chi. Maybe some people have the intention to make beautiful form and to show. But I think some people who really want to dig in the truth and the essence of practice, they want to really sense the body. They want to sense this maybe little electricity flows in their body, and they want to sense the heat traveling in different parts of the body, and they want to sense where the qi is leading the body to. And that's the most interesting part. Showing is not interesting compared with what the body can do, because the body can do so much more than what your mind wants to show. Yeah. So once you get over that, you really go into the field, and then you can go deeper and deeper. Yeah.
Is it important to feel this electricity sensation, would you say? Or?
No, you wouldn't want to look for it, because once you are in a state of seeking for something, you already set a goal in front of you, and then you wouldn't notice the subtle little things that are happening. So that's what here and now is for. Yeah. So for me, when I'm practicing, I don't really have any goals. I don't want to heal myself. I don't want to be slim. I don't want to be pretty and make new forms. No, I just want to relax and let it happen. Yeah, so let it naturally happen, and see, oh, my body is doing this now. My mind is thinking about this, or I'm seeing this, and this little cigarette is sitting on the ground, and what does it make my body move? Yeah, like this kind of. And then your attention flows from inside to outside and come back to inside again. So you never have a fixed point where you put your attention to, but it's always flowing, always changing. Yeah, it's always new.
Yeah, that's something I read, that Prapto was interested in this idea of constant evolution of our being.
Yeah.
How do you work with that when?
Evolution. Well, that's a very big topic. Yeah, I think Prapto's idea. In Java there is a saying called asa, ase, asu. It's 3 different Javanese words, and they means asa means polish each other, live together and polish each other, practice and then understand each other better. And ase is like to nourish each other, and nourish, and then asu means love and compassion and kindness, or maybe something similar. So I think Prapto wants to inspire us with the idea of asa, ase, asu in the movement practice, because we're constantly making dialogue with the environment. In this way, we make peace with the dialogue, with the environment and with ourselves. We polish our sharp points, and then we create this common field for love and kindness. And that's the way towards love and kindness is like some sort of evolution. But Prapto is very interesting. He doesn't want to call his work meditation or healing or spirituality. He only wants to see it from the art perspective, because in art they have the space of the unknown, and they have the space of creation. So you don't have to have fixed ideas about where you go, about what you're doing, but you're allowing different things to happen. If you have imagination, if you have egos, if you have emotions, it's okay. If you become a demon in the movement, it's okay, because it's art. It's very broad, and in this field everyone can blossom, everyone can feel themselves or not themselves. It's okay. So that's another idea of blossoming, to let it naturally grow and then become a flower, and to have the pleasant smell, and then people can enjoy, can see.
Right, the kind of the broad, like maybe the embodiment of this broad freedom.
Yes.
Yeah, in your movements and the way you're being.
Yes.
I see. I think maybe that's a very high level, right? Maybe the highest level
We're on the way. We're in the process of evolution.
Right.
Yes.
So evolving towards that condition.
Yes.
I see. So it's very Buddhist in that respect.
Yes,
it seems.
Prapto himself is Buddhist, and actually, I myself personally experienced that kind of state, which was really wonderful. One time when I was moving in Bali on Prapto's workshop, and we didn't really have any verbal communication, but we started to pick up different flower petals, or flower petals from the ground, and we put in the center of the space, and one by one people start to put more and more leaves and flowers on this, and it formed some sort of like a mandala, and they're just growing from the middle point and slowly spread in the space and became like a very, very big mandala on the ground. And some people put branches and they link the flower mandala towards Prapto. So after 1 hour of very meditative, very quiet, peaceful movement practice, we left this art installation on the ground without really talking to each other. And it's really magnificent because you can see this is like a manifestation of our move. It's like the manifestation of the moment, of the mind state, of the love we have in our heart. And then I think I really had an enlightened moment in that practice, because I felt after it, there's no border between myself and the environment. I saw the moons, I saw the trees, I saw other people's. I think I felt mystical. Yeah. I felt they're part of myself, they're part of my body, and my small ego dissolved in that moment. And I didn't want to speak for about maybe half an hour or 1 hour, because there's nothing to speak. It's just this massive emptiness and quietness and peace and love coming from both outside and inside, which was really, really wonderful.
Amazing.
Yes. And in the recent practice, in my workshop in Dali, China, the workshop me and my colleague, we worked together. And my colleague Ibet, he was leading that session, and we were moving on the beach of the sea, and there are lots of dead trees on the beach. And at one point I really felt attracted. Then I walked towards one that root. I was moving with it, and my body just very strange. It knows where it goes, and it was just blending with the trees perfectly. Even the trees that have very quirky shapes, it can be really uncomfortable for people to sit on or lie on. But my body is really finding its space and to flow with the trees. And then in one moment I felt there's some very mysterious or unknown feeling come to me, that I'm not myself anymore, but I think I was really tuning with the tree, and I felt there's something from long time ago. And this unfamiliar emotions almost made me cry, and it's a sharp pain in my heart area, but I definitely didn't know what was going on. But every moment was so precise. I didn't need to design my movement. I didn't need to know where I'm going. There is some massive energy was pushing me to new positions. And yeah, that was very interesting. And after that time, I also I didn't need to talk, because the language, the left brain just fade away. I didn't need them anymore, and I had this state of Zen after the practice. Yeah, wow. But definitely that was something unknown, which I think is interesting to explore further.
So there must be a very different feeling on a beach compared to in a forest, let's say.
Everywhere is so different. Yeah. If you move in the elevator, that's a different story too. So basically everywhere you can use it as a practice space. Yeah.
Right. So it seems, Prapto brought something very special into your life.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear about your experience when you first went to Indonesia and arrived there. Could you tell us a little story maybe about, so you got off, let's say you get off the plane in Indonesia, and then what happens next?
Oh, the first time actually I went to Indonesia for an art festival. It wasn't for Prapto's practice. And we went to a very small island called Jelolo. Many Indonesian people don't even know this island. It's a very rural, very primitive. And I remember we went to a province called Ternate, and we got off the plane, and all the buildings, like tiny little houses, so colorful. Even they're run down, they're very shabby, but people put very bright colors on their buildings. And it's so tropical and so warm, and it's so lively. And then we took a boat, the fast boat, from the province Ternate to Jelolo, the island. And on the island, it's just, it's so special. I don't even know how to describe it. So, for example, in one night we went to the home of the regent king of the island, and he was just retired, and his home was like open to anyone. It's on the mountain, so anyone who wants to visit can visit. And we went there at 10 p.m. in the evening, and there was no light at all on the island. And we were driving our cars, and we were lost in the forest. And then when the car stopped, I could hear a symphony of different insects and birds and creatures making sound in the forest. It's so beautiful. You can hear owls, maybe foxes, maybe geckos, and maybe things I can't even know how to name them. And there is a composer went with us together, and he immediately took out this recording machine, and he started to record this wonderful sound from the nature. So I feel that Indonesia is like a place where the connection with the ancestors, with the religions, with the spirits are still there. It's not cut, and that you can sense it's like a timeless space where you can sense everything from the history and from other dimensions.
Sounds like something prehistoric, maybe like where dinosaurs.
Yes, yes. Well, people climb coconut trees, and people go to capture fish and like barefoot. And we went to a spice mountain where there are lots of different spices are growing in the mountain, and they cook fish for us in the bamboo. You know, they put fish in the bamboo, and
Lovely.
they burn coconut shells to heat it. And after eating with our hands, and when we are going down the mountain, they are singing their primitive songs from the top of the mountain and saying goodbye to us. Can you imagine
Amazing.
that kind of lifestyle? It's just so inspiring. And I hear that people rarely get diabetes or cancer or heart disease in that island because they're just so close with nature. They know the way how nature works, the balance. So we are in that island. People are still part of the nature. We're not separate from the nature, or we're not superior beings.
I thought Indonesia was mostly a Muslim country. Is that right?
Yes, on that island, half people are Muslim, half are Christian, but they live very peacefully with each other. Yeah.
It seems they also have a very strong sense of folk, maybe like ancient way of living. I mean, how does the religion play a very big role in their lives there?
Well, I don't know very well about Indonesian history, but I know that before Muslim came to Indonesia, they had their own beliefs of ancestor, of animism. So they actually believed everything has its own spirit, and they worship the spirit. And for example, now Bali adopted Hinduism, but the Balinese Hindu still has aspects of animism and ancestor worship of ancestors. So now they still have this rituals, and they make offerings with flowers to worship different spirits. For example, if you want to enter a temple, you don't only worship the god, but you worship the spirits who are guarding the space, and you also worship the bad spirits or evil spirits. You give them food so they can you can make peace with them, and they don't make disasters in your life. Yeah, so they really respect all kinds of different spiritual beings. Yeah, and I think maybe in the old Java they also have something similar, but when the Buddhism and Islam came, and slowly it became weaker, but still they still have some shamans in Java, and I saw them doing their rituals in the water. It was quite amazing.
Oh, they do their rituals in the water?
That's really interesting. This last year, Prapto took us to this shaman gathering, like a shaman conference, and every shaman had a dagger, and traditional Javanese dagger. Kris, yeah, they call it kris. And some kris are curly with the shape of snake, and some are straight. And they were doing some mantras, holding the kris, and then they were forming a line and slowly walking towards the pond, and they all walk into the pond and form a circle again. And they started to sing their national songs. They started to sing the national, like the Indonesian
national anthem.
Yes.
Amazing.
That's very amazing. It's like, wow. And Prapto told us these shamans were praying that the gods and the spirits will protect the country. Yeah, I never thought like really religion can be so close with government or politics, but it's like, so amazing. Yeah.
So let's get back to when you first went there. And
sorry.
That's okay. That's fine. And you said you arrived and the forest was very interesting, and then as you were heading towards Prapto's place, then
yes, you want me to talk about the
just your first impressions and your first
hot, definitely very hot. Prapto lives in a city called Solo, which is in Central Java. It's a very old kingdom, and it's very Muslim. Everywhere you can see temples and also quite chaotic as well.
So is there like a one Buddhist temple there, or what's the presence of Buddhism like in that region?
Well, we didn't really go to any Buddhism temples, but we went to Borobudur. Borobudur is the massive architecture complex. I think it was built 600 years ago, and in those I don't know how to describe, in this architecture there are little Buddhas inside of all the many like giant jars putting upside down, and they have Buddha statues inside of them. And there are also other Buddhism temples in Java, in Yogyakarta, like Lausan Temple. I think Prambanan might also be a Buddhist temple.
So there's all these different religions side by side in Java.
Yes. I think it's like Buddhism is like a very peaceful religion. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't imagine Buddhism people fight.
Well, they do in Burma at the moment. But,
okay.
But that's interesting to see that they seem tolerant of one another, I guess.
Yes, and also Hindu, like very ancient Hindu temples in Java. One of Prapto's favorite practice place is a Hindu temple called Candi Suku. In the temple, there is a very interesting Mexican-like pyramid. Yes, there's a pyramid there, and also some statues with very quirky shapes and forms, like an eagle without a head, and then a person like with giant eyes and holding a big stick, like it's gonna hit someone. And there are lots of symbols of phallus, maybe, because in Hinduism, I think people worship
the lingam,
the
yoni.
linga and yoni. Yeah, they have a statue of yoni on the left side. They have a statue of linga on the right side, and we move in that space. And the first time we went there, it was so quiet, no touristy at all, and we were moving, and slowly I was tuning with the environment, and I noticed that my body moved in such a quirky way, and I've never moved like that before. I was really inspired by the environment. I feel like some spirit was in my body and teaching me how to move in their way. And I was totally blending in that atmosphere. And then it started to get really foggy. So in the fog, you couldn't really see anything anymore.
So this was a real fog. It wasn't like...
It's a real fog, yeah. And it creates it makes the space even more mysterious. We were just moving in the fog for 1 hour, and then it started to rain. And then the rain was gone, and the sky was like crystal blue. Yeah, that was amazing. And then Prapto also took us to a beach called...
So was this on your first day, or...?
Yeah, that's our first day. The first morning, 7 a.m., Prapto came to pick us, and we went to Candi Suku together.
I see. So you actually went, on your first time there, you actually went to stay at it wasn't at some place where Prapto lives, it was actually in a guest house, or...?
We live in a hotel and opposite an university where Prapto gave his regular lessons. But Prapto likes to take the participants to different temples and beaches and mountains just to sense the nature. And sometimes if he wants to only give us body works, and we will go to the university, and there is an outdoor place like what do you call? like an open space,
yard, like a courtyard, or
it has a roof on top of it, so you wouldn't get too hot. Yeah, like we practice in that kind of places. Yeah.
And so so you said on your first day, so you went to the hotel, and then in the morning at 7 o'clock, he came to and picked everyone up?
Yeah, that was the first time I met him.
And what was your first impression?
Well, Prapto is so easygoing. He's not like a master at all. Like, he doesn't have this
kind of bearing. You mean like
bearing,
a
he doesn't have
posture,
that posture. No, not at all. Before, I was chatting with him on WhatsApp, and he always sent me stickers. So I feel like
emoji.
Yeah, emojis, all kinds of different emojis. So cute, so funny. And the first time I met him, I felt like he's just such a wonderful grandpa, human being. But he's wearing some traditional Javanese clothes, but it suits him perfectly. And he was smiling at me, and his teeth were falling off, but that just makes me feel very approachable in a way. And I thought, oh, this is going to be so special. And he took us to breakfast, which is like a restaurant on the way to Candi Suku. And we were sitting together on the table. We ordered the Indonesian traditional fruit with fish sauce. Yeah, which is quite refreshing. It's spicy, sour, and yeah, it's a very interesting taste. And then there's a giant spider, with the size of my palm, just outside the window. That image was like, oh, it's impossible to forget. And that's
really
the first
in the
breakfast.
jungle now. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you had the breakfast, and then they went to this place.
Yeah, we went to Candi Suku. We practiced the whole day there, about 4-5 hours. And Prapto, he's very sharp. He can give you instructions exactly what you need. But sometimes he's also not paying much attention on what you do, because he's always on the phone. He's always checking Facebook and talking to people. So sometimes he's smoking and drinking coffee and chatting on the phone. And occasionally he's looking at you, say, oh, nice, go on. And then he'll go back to the phone and his cigarette. Yeah, that's his style of teaching. And sometimes Prapto will just start to sing, start to chant in a very shamanic way, which is very intriguing, because his voice, from his voice you can feel the culture, you can feel the space, and you can feel something unknown and unseen, and it can open up your sensations, and you suddenly move in a brand new way just because he's channeling this information. And
Is he doing it in a traditional way? Is it a traditional Javanese style that he's doing, or is it his own kind of personal style?
I think his own personal style, but also influenced by his culture. Yeah.
This is the end of podcast 2, part 2, Amerta and Beyond with Bo SiWen, which is continued in part 3 of this series.